coming to you from Dynasty Owner, and we're going to go ahead and jump straight into our article, into our video. So what I did last week was I did our Don't Tilt After 1 Week article. I did that last year as well, and then I'm going to extend that into the second week this year. So talked about the first 16 teams last week. I'm going to talk about the rest of the 16 teams this week. So it's going to be titled Don't Tilt After 2 Weeks. Let's jump into it. So there's a lot of reasons why people tilt. Impatience is probably the biggest one. People are just going to give up on a player. You know, they spend all offseason, all preseason getting ready for the season to start, and they don't see the results they want the first couple of weeks, and it causes people to make, kind of emotional or irrational decisions. So I'm a pretty patient person. I know most of you are that you play Dynasty Owner. The only case where I would really give up on somebody is obviously, a season-ending injury or an injury that's going to last the majority of the season. And even in that case, in Dynasty Owner, it doesn't mean that you need to drop the player. It just means, move him to the IR, maybe trade him away. But we need to be patient with these players, a lot of them, especially if they're still healthy. So I'm going to go through, I'll talk about 8 of the teams. I broke down all 16 on the back end in my article, but I'm only going to talk about half of them today. So let's first start with the Raiders. So they're actually one of the only teams that's undefeated. I think there's 7 of them. So one of the few teams that are still undefeated. They beat quality opponents too. They beat the Ravens and the Steelers. Josh Jacobs had a fantastic week 1. We know on the back of a 2-touchdown game. He did sit out week 2 though, and that's troubling with that injury. I'm no injury expert, but the assumption is that he'll be back sooner than later. I know John Gruden went out, I think it was today, maybe yesterday. He said that he's questionable already. So not great news, but I'm hopeful that he'll return to action sooner than later. I don't have much concern for Jacobs long-term in this season, even despite the injury and really his touchdown dependence for really his entire career. So the Rams, I have little concern for anybody in the Rams offense. They've been, offensively rolling the 2 games that they played in. I'd like to see more projection from Woods. I think most of us would, but you're kind of getting what you paid for whenever you drafted him. I mean, you knew what you were getting. So he's an extremely consistent wide receiver with a floor of about 10 to 12 fantasy points. Unfortunately, the past 2 weeks, he's been right at his floor. So he had week 1 was 12.4, and then last week 2 was 12. So he's pretty much right at his floor there. But when you get a player like that, and then you got the upside of, mid-20s games, 25 games, that's the kind of player that you drafted. So really can't be too upset. Just go ahead and be patient with him as well. Let's talk about the Vikings. So that Cardinals-Vikings game in week 2 was a very good game. Unfortunate that it had to end the way that it did, but one of the most entertaining games of the season so far. We obviously know, if you watched it or saw the highlights, Greg Joseph, he missed a 37-yard field goal, and that ended up losing them the game. So even with the 0-2 start, though, the Vikings have a plethora of great fantasy production. We got Cousins, 63.2 fantasy points, Thielen, 42.1, Cook has 38.2, and Justin Jefferson, 31.1. So very productive, even though they're not winning games. And I think that's going to continue. They're going to be playing comeback in a lot of games this season, especially once they start playing. I don't want to say the Cardinals aren't a worthy opponent because they're a good team, but they have a tough schedule the rest of this way. So I think they're going to be playing catch up, and then that's obviously good for fantasy production. We know that. Let's talk about the Saints. So the Saints game, I don't know what to say about what has happened to them the past 2 weeks. They came out and they absolutely just trounced on Green Bay, and then they go out and lose to, albeit the better Panthers. I mean, obviously, they're 2-0, so they're better, but I didn't expect a game like that. So the Saints got blown out 26-7 to the Saints, or to the Panthers. And I actually thought about this line when I was watching the game, and it was closer to the end. So does this Saints performance say more about Rodgers, Darnold, or Winston? And when you really think about it, it's like the defense of the Saints was outstanding. They limited Rodgers, but they couldn't limit Darnold. And then you also see how Winston came out in week 1 and just lit everybody up, as opposed to this week when, what did he throw? He threw a couple interceptions, didn't get any touchdowns. He only completed half his passes too. So it's I don't know. These next couple weeks are going to be telling. Obviously you're not giving up on anybody. If you have Winston, he's probably going to be your bench quarterback. You're not giving up on Kamara. So really not much else to report there. Just kind of a very confusing start for the Saints. The Jets kind of summed it up real quickly on my article. Zach Wilson, he's a rookie. He went to go up against a top-tier defense, and he paid the price for it. Just happens. One of those things that happen. Even if Wilson isn't what we thought he was going to be in this rookie season, I fully, projected he's going to be a great quarterback, real-life quarterback, and a great fantasy quarterback as the years go on. So don't make any extreme decisions, any emotional decisions about Wilson based on one bad game. Steelers, I don't think I'd ever be able to trust Ben Roethlisberger as a starting quarterback in Dynasty Owner. If push comes to shove, I think you're able to. You get to the bye weeks, that makes sense that he would slide in as your starting quarterback, but he's the perfect candidate for a bench quarterback. And I've said this many times. Some of you probably know what I'm about to say, but the winning combination for a bench quarterback is a player who is on a cheap salary, which Ben would fit that bill. $14 million. You might not think it's not super cheap. It's kind of middle of the road, but cheap enough for a quarterback of his caliber. So a cheap quarterback with middle of the road production, which is what Big Ben has given you the past 2 games, right at 16 fantasy points per game. So not great. You want to see more, but if you have him on your bench, you have to be happy with what he's given you, especially if you have a better quarterback that's starting in front of him. And just a quick reminder, I put this in my article too, but I mentioned the bench scoring. Here at Dynasty Owner, players on your bench, you're going to add 25% of their fantasy points to your overall total. So if you're new to the Dynasty Owner, new to watching my videos, just put that in your head that you get points for bench players as well. Moving to the Seahawks. So Tyler Lockett has more than doubled DK Metcalf's production this year. It's really unbelievable. I think they started on a similar path last season. Might have to vet that, but I think it was a pretty similar start to the season. But the truth is, it's just too small of a sample size. There's going to be games where Lockett outscores Metcalf by double, as apparently we've seen the past 2 weeks. But then there's also going to be games where Metcalf, takes over and Lockett is kind of forgotten about. We really haven't seen many games where they both coexist. I mean, there's been some, but not as many as you would think. It's usually one or the other. So it's going to be kind of boom or bust for each of them. I'm not getting discouraged. I'm going to hold Metcalf probably. I have him in one of my Dynasty Owner leagues. Maybe even send an offer for him if you see that the Metcalf owner's panicking a little bit. Definitely something that you can at least look into. And finally, let's talk about the Titans. So I was watching this game and I was fully prepared to talk about Derrick Henry because the game was not going well for him through the first half. He was on his way to a very disappointing fantasy week. And then he does what he almost always does, is he comes out in the second half. He just gets better as the game goes on. I don't know if he's wearing the defense down or what, but he really does get better in the second half. And here, this is what highlights that. So in the first halves of games, the 2 games this year, he had 43 rushing yards on 22 attempts. I mean, awful. That's less than 2 yards per carry. In the second halves of these 2 games, he's had 25 rushes for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's just unbelievable how much better he gets. I guess it's that the game moves on and the defenses get more tired, and he doesn't. So it's really unbelievable. That's all I'm going to talk about today. Like I said, I only talked about 8 teams today. Go ahead and read my article. I talk about the other 8. I appreciate everybody watching and listening. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter, Dynasty Jerk. Follow us on YouTube and also on Twitter as well at Dynasty Owner. And then, Dynasty Owner on YouTube. Just go ahead and search that if you want to see all these videos. I appreciate everybody listening, watching, reading my article. Take care and be safe.